They said she was cursed, a child born in a storm marked by tragedy before she could even speak. Her mother burned for defying the crown. Her father sold her name for gold. Alone in a world built to break her, she learned the only truth that mattered: no one saves the forgotten. From the ashes of betrayal, she forged herself into something England had never seen. A woman who could bend kings, silence armies, and command the very nation that once tried to destroy her. Her enemies called her witch, her people called her savior. History would call her Queen Isolde Valenheart, the woman who rose from ruin to rule an empire. This isn't a tale of mercy. It's a story of power born from pain, and how one broken girl became England's most unstoppable queen. Long before her name echoed through the marble halls of England's greatest castles, she was just a forgotten child, thin, pale, and silent. Her name was Isolde Valenheart, daughter of a disgraced nobleman and a healer mother who dared to defy the crown. Her story began not in light, but in shadow. The winter she was born, the sky itself seemed to mourn. Her father's estate, Blackmere, was a cold fortress perched on cliffs above the sea, where every gust of wind carried whispers of sorrow. Her mother, Lady Elira, was her only warmth. She taught Isolde that power was not in bloodlines or crowns. It was in knowing what others refused to see. But when the nobles accused Elira of witchcraft, her father did not defend her. He handed her over to the king's men to save his own title. Isolde watched, frozen, as her mother was dragged away into the night. The next morning, the pyre burned outside their gates, and the scent of smoke haunted Isolde for years. From that day, her heart fractured. Her father forbade her to speak of Elira again. He told the world his wife died of fever. But Isolde knew the truth. And truth has a way of growing sharper with silence. Locked in her chamber, she read her mother's hidden journals, writings about medicine, politics, and rebellion. At only 10 years old, Isolde began to understand how her world worked. Men ruled, women served, and mercy was a myth. When her father remarried, his new wife despised her. Servants whispered that Isolde was cursed, that any who looked into her eyes would see death reflected back. By 13, she was more ghost than girl. But even ghosts can learn to haunt the living. One stormy night, she overheard her father's plot to marry her to an aging lord in exchange for gold and favor. "Let the girl rot in his bed," he said, laughing. That laughter became the spark that lit her soul aflame. That night, Isolde fled Blackmere Castle, barefoot in the snow, clutching her mother's journal to her chest. The world thought she had died in the river that swallowed her carriage, but Isolde did not die. She began to live. For days, she wandered the frozen countryside, surviving on stale bread, hiding from soldiers who searched the woods. Her body ached, her feet bled, but her eyes burned brighter than ever. Hunger sharpened her mind. Pain became her teacher. She reached a village near York, where the locals spoke of rebellion against cruel lords. There she met Mara, a former soldier turned outlaw, a woman who led a band of rebels living deep in the forest. Mara saw something fierce in the young girl who refused to die. She took her in, taught her to fight, to read maps, to wield a dagger like a whisper. Years passed. Isolde grew stronger, both in body and in will. She learned that survival was not enough. Vengeance was purpose. Under Mara's guidance, she became a strategist. They attacked tax convoys, freed prisoners, and burned the estates of those who starved the poor. But Isolde wasn't driven by chaos. She studied every noble house, every alliance, every crack in England's power. She became known as the Crimson Rose, a ghostly symbol carved on doors of corrupt lords before their downfall. Rumors reached the royal court. The king sent troops to crush the rebels, but every time they marched into the forest, they vanished without trace. It wasn't long before people whispered that the Crimson Rose was not a bandit, but a spirit of vengeance sent by heaven itself. One night, while raiding a caravan carrying royal documents, Isolde found something that changed everything: a letter sealed with her father's crest. He was now allied with the king, trading his loyalty for gold. His betrayal had bought him comfort, while she had starved in the snow. Isolde smiled coldly. The girl who ran away would never return. But the woman she had become, she was coming back for everything. By 21, Isolde Valenheart had built an army in the shadows. Her rebels were no longer mere peasants. They were spies, knights, and even nobles' sons who had grown tired of lies. Her network spread across England like wildfire, fueled by whispers, secrets, and the fear of her name. She knew that true power was not taken by sword, it was taken by knowledge. So she infiltrated the royal court disguised as a lady-in-waiting under a false name. For months she observed the court's politics, the king's greed, and the queen's quiet despair. She became the silent listener, learning who plotted, who lied, and who could be used. The king, old and suspicious, began to fear the growing unrest. Isolde seized the moment. Using secret letters, false confessions, and carefully placed rumors, she turned noble against noble. When they begged the king for peace, she offered a solution herself. She would serve as the king's advisor to help restore order. Her plan worked. From the shadows of the throne, she began to pull the strings. She redirected taxes to feed villages, broke alliances that threatened peace, and exposed traitors who never existed, so she could replace them with her own loyalists. The king believed he was still in control, but in truth, every law he signed, every decision he made, carried her invisible hand. The Crimson Rose had become the power behind the throne. Then fate turned again. One winter's night, the king drank poisoned wine at a feast. His death shocked the realm. The council panicked. But when they looked for a leader to stabilize the chaos, their eyes turned toward the one woman who already commanded the armies, the treasury, and the people's loyalty. Isolde Valenheart was crowned as England's first queen regent. The broken child was now the ruler her enemies feared most. The crown was heavier than she imagined. Its jewels sparkled like frozen blood, beautiful but born of pain. Isolde ruled not as a queen of mercy, but as one of resolve. Her first decree was justice for the forgotten. Food filled the villages, roads were repaired, and women were granted rights to own land for the first time. The people called her the Iron Queen, but the nobles called her a witch, whispering that she had bewitched the late king. Yet none dared challenge her openly, for her spies were everywhere. She transformed the kingdom's economy, forged alliances through cunning diplomacy, and rebuilt England's army into a disciplined force loyal only to her. But as her power grew, so did her enemies' hatred. Secret plots formed in candlelit chambers. Assassins crept through castle halls. Isolde faced them all with cold precision. When a duke tried to revolt, she invited him to a banquet, toasted to his loyalty, and had him arrested before dessert. Still, her heart ached. The woman who once longed for warmth now trusted no one. Mara, her old mentor, was killed by conspirators, and Isolde stood alone. Her only companion was the crown that dug thorns into her soul. Yet she never broke. She told herself that every scar, every sleepless night was the price of power. And though she was feared, she was also loved by the people who finally saw justice. Years later, as her enemies united for one final rebellion, Isolde faced them herself on the battlefield. Her armor shone crimson beneath the dawn. Her soldiers called her name like a prayer. When she raised her sword, it wasn't for vengeance anymore. It was for the girl who once had nothing but hope. When Queen Isolde Valenheart died, the world mourned as if it had lost an era. The bells of every city tolled for 3 days. Her enemies had vanished long before her final breath, but her legend remained immortal. They said she was both fire and frost, unforgiving yet just. Her name became a symbol for every woman who refused to kneel. Her reforms reshaped England forever, birthing an age of progress that lasted centuries. In the Chronicles of Kings, her story was often rewritten, softened, or hidden. But the people never forgot. Mothers told their daughters, "Do not fear being broken. Fear never learning to rise." Blackmere Castle, once a place of pain, became her memorial. Travelers still say that on cold nights when the wind howls over the cliffs, you can hear her whisper, "I was never their queen to please them. I was their queen to change them." From broken child to England's most powerful woman, she did not inherit her crown. She forged